This is a Hayward Tuck Stories recording of Some Talk of Monsters, Book 1, An English Heritage. Copyright Jack Hayward Tuck. Chapter 3, Heart-Shaped Leaves. The fourth-year student sitting by the window in the canteen knew the significance of the treehouse, for Brian and Jamie had been up inside. Sarah and Poppy too had squeezed their way in through the door and climbed the narrow trunk. This was 4 years ago. But first, they had to break the chain, which the park wardens had wrapped around the trunk back in the spring of '88, before the gang had arrived at the college. "Great place to have a few bevies," said Brian, looking up at the tree house. Jamie nodded, staring at Brian's beer belly, then back at the narrow tree trunk. "Awesome," he said. "We'll never break this chain, though. It's too heavy." "Never say never, Jamie boy," Brian quipped, giving the back of his friend's head a rough rubbing with his large hands. His hair still felt prickly after a mere 2 days since his trip to the barber's. "We could buy some cutters, I suppose," Jamie suggested. "Cost a bit, though." "Worth it, don't you think?" "It'd be one in the eye for the wardens." For 3 years this heavy chain had prevented students from climbing up inside. The treehouse was sure to have a few secrets, and the boys were convinced of it. They had to climb up inside. It was Jamie who wanted to find out what was so special about the treehouse. He had been impressed by its form and grandeur since the first time he saw it, which happened to be on the day of his interview earlier in the spring of '91, something he had in common with Kip. A few days had gone by when Brian and Jamie returned to the treehouse with the girls. "I can't believe you managed to steal these steel cutters," said Jamie. "Borrowed. I didn't steal them," said Sarah, being the actual one to take them from the tin cupboard in the park warden's yard. Sarah brushed back her long blonde hair and knelt down on the ground, trying not to dirty her jeans. "Can I do it?" asked Poppy, looking every bit the scientist in her cream overalls. "The cutting, I mean." "By all means, if you think you can," said Brian. Sarah turned to smile at Poppy, the light from the sky reflecting in her large framed glasses. "I'm not a weakling, you know, Brian. Give the cutters to me, Sarah. I want to be the one to do it." "Let her have a go, Sarah," said Brian, with a smirk on his dirty face. Brian had been handling some of the barrels in the park warden's shed before walking into a dusty carpet which was hanging on a line. He had wiped the dust from his cheeks, leaving 2 thick stripes of muck. "What's up, puppy? Can't you do it, girl?" said Brian. But after a few more contorted facial expressions, the chain broke. "Oh, well done," said Brian. "She's my girl." "You've got cobwebs in your hair, Brian, and you need to wipe that muck off your face. Come on, shift your backside, boy, and climb up the tree." "Keep you cool," said Brian, excited to be the first in through the door. The girls watched as Brian crawled through the small door in the tree trunk on his hands and knees. "You've got a fat bottom, Brian. Careful you don't get it stuck," said Sarah, mocking him. Brian was soon inside and struggling up the narrow trunk, using the wooden slats which were nailed on either side of the hollowed-out tree. A proper ladder wasn't possible in such a tight space, and the slats had made it easier to climb up relatively fast. Brian pushed open the hatch and shone his torch towards the far end of the treehouse. "What the devil?" he cried, falling backwards in surprise and dropping his torch back down the trunk. "Ah, you idiot! You could have hit me on the head," Jamie cried out. "What the hell is that? I think there's a dead body up here, guys. Pass me the torch again, somebody." "What? Here, take mine," said Jamie, who was right behind him, coming up the trunk. "Is it a body?" Brian shone his torch once more at the dark, hulking mass at the end of the narrow room. At first, the beam from the torch hit the body, lighting up a smart blue coat and a tartan necktie. Next, the light moved upwards onto the creature's face as Brian climbed cautiously into the treehouse to have a closer look. "It's a scary-looking scarecrow." "Scared you all right," said Poppy, pushing her head up through the hatch, trying to squeeze up past Jamie as he helped her through the hatch. "Are you coming up, Sarah?" asked Jamie, calling down as he too pushed himself up and climbed into the dark room. "Are you sure there's enough room up there inside for all of us?" "Yeah, just about." "Yeah, no worries, coming up," said Brian. "Okay, guys, if you're sure." Sarah, being the last to enter the treehouse, preferred to stay by the hatch, as it was a tight squeeze with the four of them up inside, and she hated feeling cramped. "Ugly-looking thing," said Poppy. But the scarecrow wasn't to be their only discovery that day. They also found a book under a loose floorboard. It was the copy of Frankenstein Hop and Max were reading together. There was also something inside the book, a piece of folded paper, a letter in code Hop had written to Max after the boys had fallen out. It was after decoding this letter that the gang were close to finding out the truth about the boys. Not the official version of truth, nor the myth created around the strange events which had happened during this time. The real truth. But as Jamie had once explained, isn't it sometimes better not to change history? When the stories retold create a heaven rather than a hell of knowing the truth. Heroes other than victims or monsters. Isn't it better to hide the more unsavoury details? Lock them up in some metaphorical Pandora's box? Jamie could have been right, for most cannot handle an exposé of truth and honesty, especially when so many had turned a blind eye to their own suspicions. After Kip had rushed in and made his announcement about the treehouse, it was this table of fourth-year students who were troubled the most. After years of trying to piece together the facts in their quest to prove Catherine Brooks was a murderess, they had all but given up. Nothing could be proven one way or another, so the gang had decided to lay their investigations to rest. But after witnessing Kip's dramatic entrance that day, and hearing those words leave his quivering mouth with such an eruption of emotion, the gang could not help but recall the dramas they had all been caught up in during their first 2 years at the college. Kip had reawakened their demons. It was the morning after his running in and screaming that the treehouse was gone when the gang saw Kip again. This time Kip was silent and kept his head down as he walked in between the tables. The whole canteen was quiet, as if on tenterhooks, waiting for another outburst from the new chick. They were silent until Sarah spoke up and asked, "The kid in black, the nervous one with the blonde hair. He's the one we saw yesterday, isn't he?" "Yes," said Jamie, returning to the table on his way back from the salad bar. "Who is this guy? He's a fresher, yeah?" "Obviously," answered Brian, while taking a bite out of his dry bacon sandwich. "If he is new here," Poppy muttered, looking up from her geology book, "why is he so bothered about the treehouse?" "She's right," Jamie replied. "I mean, it's not there anymore." "Well, guess he saw it when he came here for his interview," Brian mumbled with his mouth full, and had planned to climb up inside. "Ah, like us, you mean?" asked Sarah. "Poor kid. He's come at the wrong time, hasn't he? He's missed all the fun and excitement. Such a shame. Everything's changing around here." "I wouldn't say it's all been fun, Sarah." "Jamie's right," said Brian. "We shouldn't call it fun." After a few moments' silence, Sarah looked up from her plate and said, "But we did have fun, didn't we, guys?" She felt a renewal of excitement well up in her. It had been months since they had spoken about the treehouse and its mysteries. "I suppose we did, Sarah. Not that it did us any favours." "Oh, well. So they've pulled the treehouse down?" "I suppose they were bound to," said Poppy. "Bound to?" asked Brian, picking at his tooth, trying to free a piece of bacon. "Well, they could hardly leave it standing, Brian." "Not really," Sarah continued, "not when the college found out what went up inside." Kip was still standing with his tray of food in the middle of the hall. He was looking around to see if he could spot a friendly face. He didn't. None of his friends were having dinner, so he walked up to an empty table and put his tray down gently, so not to draw any attention to himself. But unknown to Kip, Jamie was watching him. Brian looked up from his sandwich and saw Jamie staring at the new kid, so he took the initiative and called out to him. "Hey, kid," he grunted in his gruff voice. Kip, startled by hearing what he thought was his name, looked towards the window where the voice had come from. It was obviously coming from that large guy in the rugby shirt staring back at him. The man was sitting at a table of older students. Kip didn't recognize any of them and felt a rush of anxiety. He looked away, picking up his fork. "Hey, you!" the man shouted again. This time Kip pretended he didn't hear and started to eat his food. "You in the black hooded jacket!" Brian shouted. He was giving Kip a hard stare. Kip still chose to ignore the brute. He was scruffy looking, and from his distance he could see how the man had hairy hands. "Hey, Blondie," a girl called out. She was sitting across from the man in the rugby shirt. This time Kip couldn't help looking up from his sausage, bacon and eggs, for she had a kind voice. "Come and join us," she said. "Come on." At this point, the prettiest girl at the table joined in the chorus. "Yes, you, we want to talk to you, sweetie." Kip looked at her. He thought she looked harmless enough, and then he looked at the guy and hoped he wasn't her boyfriend. He was a large and hefty-looking brute, and built as strong as a rugby player, hence the shirt. So Kip, having no other alternative, stood up from his table, picked up his tray, and walked to their table. He looked at the guy again. On closer inspection, Kip thought he had an ordinary, unthreatening face. Kip smiled apprehensively. "I didn't think they had any sausages left," Brian growled, noticing Kip's plate. "They're cold," Kip replied nervously, having decided this hunk of a man-beast sitting opposite the pretty girls could be someone to keep your distance from after all. "Hello. You're a first year, aren't you? I'm Sarah, and this is Poppy. We're all fourth-year students." "Hi, Environmental Studies," Poppy said. "I think you're in the hostel below mine. I've seen you with this cute-looking lad. You know, the one you hang out with." "Poppy," Brian growled. "And this is our Jamie boy, another one of our young scientists." Jamie smiled but didn't say anything. "You can call me Brian. I'm in education too. Also taking environmental studies." "I always find this funny," said Kip, fidgeting in his chair. "I mean, this is an art college, isn't it?" "We're the teaching faculty," said Sarah. "I mean, what are you lot going to do with your art degrees?" "Teach," Jamie muttered. "If you're lucky." "Sit yourself down, mate," said Brian, eyeing the last sausage on Kip's plate. "What do they call you, then?" "Nothing too horrible, I hope." "Kip," he said, watching Poppy turning the pages of her book. Kip thought she had the kindest smile. Sarah picked up her mug of coffee. "We'd like to ask you what you know about the treehouse." But before Kip could answer her, Brian, turning to look at the table behind him, sniggered and said, "She's got a face like a llama." Jamie, quick off the mark, said, "Well, she's too cute for you then, Brian." "Yes, she is," Brian answered. He had only heard the words, "she's cute" then. "Boys," said Poppy, "don't be nasty." The two girls turned to look at the girl Brian was captivated by. Sarah watched as the girl chewed on her salad, moving her lower jaw from side to side, with the occasional twitch of her flat nose. The fact that she had overused the eyeliner and mascara merely added points to the alarming sight. "She was at our hostel party last night," said Kip. "I don't think she has a room in ours, though." Jamie grinned and poked Brian in the thigh with his fork. "Ouch! That hurts." The girl looked up from her salad, hearing the noise. She saw at once Jamie was watching her eat. She smiled. She saw Kip and stood up from the table. She walked up to the gang and, in a low, husky voice, she said, "You were staring at me, you strange boy." She looked directly into Jamie's eyes. "Don't think I didn't notice, Bambi." Jamie thought she had the tone of voice that had smoked a million cigarettes. The girl watched as Jamie's large pupils dilated and moistened. "Eyes of such a deep sapphire blue," she said. "You are pretty, I'll give you that. But you don't look strong with those skinny arms and scrawny legs. I could eat a boy like you alive." "You'd never catch me," he said, feeling heat rush to his cheeks. "I can see that your legs aren't built for long distance. Fancy you noticing my legs. I'm a great observer of people too. I've observed how you have long, beautiful eyelashes. Why, you look as sweet as a girl." Her comment stunned Jamie into silence, but not before Brian had his usual dig. "Clever you noticing too," he said, grinning, grabbing Jamie's leg under the table. "She's spot on, isn't she, Jamie boy?" It was true, Jamie was a weak-looking man. He was, as the girl said, scrawny, and with his army haircut, he did look all skin and bones. His long arms and legs also meant his shirt sleeves and trousers were often an inch too short, and Jamie had long given up trying to build up his muscles since he was told by his gym instructor he had the weakest neck and limbs he had ever seen on a young man of his age. Kip sat pleased. Someone other than himself was getting ribbed. End of Chapter 3, Part 1 of An English Heritage.